are very excited to have Daniel presenting as the last speaker about his recent book and also...
Test that, Dean?
Yes, everything that bartenders do.
Hey, hello everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Daniel Waddy. Closer? Good, closer. My name is Daniel Waddy. I work at Satan's Whiskers in London, and I'm here today to talk to you about general principles of round building, which is the topic of a book that my colleague Kevin and myself published at the end of last year. Some of you already have, which I really appreciate. Now, this is a topic that I think is absolutely fundamental to bartending and doesn't necessarily get a lot of attention in bartender trainings, which is kind of our motivation for writing about this. But in terms of why do I think this is fundamental, I'm sure you can all remember back to the pandemic, not the best of times in hospitality, but in terms of when I think back to what I was missing during lockdowns, it wasn't drinks. I mean, if you want to get drunk by yourself in your house, you can do that. I mean, sales of alcohol in yeah, some of us did, hey? I mean... But yeah, I mean, it gets tired. I mean, supermarket alcohol sales in the UK were like record levels, but that's not what I was missing. What I was missing was a place where I could go and interact with other people who weren't my housemates, weren't people I work with. I mean, hospitality brings people together. That is what is, I mean, just fundamental to and great about our industry. But what that means is that as a working bartender, we are not usually making one drink at the same time. People go out together, they order drinks together. I mean, this is especially true if you're working on dispense, you get a ticket, you're going to make all of those drinks before someone takes them out to the floor. But even if you're serving over the bar, people are likely to wait until their friend gets their drink, etiquette, cheers. So what we find ourselves doing day in, day out is making more than one drink at the same time. And that is basically what round building is, no more, no less. But I guess the general idea is that whatever drinks we're serving, we want every one of them to get to its recipient at its best so that they can enjoy it and that first sip makes an impression. A little bit of background on how I came to be here talking to you about this. I had been bartending in Bristol for perhaps 5 years, so this was a while ago. Probably everything I learned in the first 2 years of that, and then I was kind of coasting. But some of my friends had already moved to London to go to work for Jonathan Downey's Match Group, and I'd kind of hear reports back from them on it. And I guess that's where I first heard the term round building. No one was talking about this where I was working at the time. And this idea that if you need to make lots of drinks together, there might be an ideal way or a sort of a better way to go about it. And yeah, I couldn't find out anything about this where I was. So in 2010, I took the plunge and moved to London because I wanted to kind of like find out more. Now, Match Group for the first decade of the 21st century was arguably the place to be to sort of bartend. To bartend in the UK. Part of the reason for this was that Jonathan, difficult character though he may be at times, also really believes in investing in bartender training. There was regular input from both Dale DeGroff and Sasha Petrasky, just two bartending greats in any era, and the group attracted motivated, like enthusiastic, talented individuals who came in and tried to push things forward and tried to find the best way to do things. So in any case, I moved to London. It was daunting at first, but I learnt, and by the time I left the company 3 years later, I'd been teaching that to our staff, and it was apparent to me that there was a lot of really good kind of information within that company that I thought should get a wider airing, and since no one else had written about it, I should. Now, during that time, I had met Kevin Armstrong, who he had been group head bartender for the company before I came to London, and I kind of figured that he was a big part of the reason why it was good. Like, a lot of the ideas seem to have come from him. So I was like, when he opened Satan's Whiskers in the end of 2013, I was like, that's where I need to go. That's who I want to do this with if I'm going to try and write a book on the topic. And it took longer than I expected. But at the end of last year, we finally got that finished. But to some extent, that was a blessing, because working for Satan's, but also working back for Jonathan Downey at Street Feast. So maybe some of you sort of experienced the Street Feast sites, but these were like big food markets, lots of different bars, and a lot of the people staffing those bars were not kind of dedicated career bartenders. So there was a lot of different kind of environments, simpler offerings, and it was a chance to kind of see how the ideas would function in a sort of variety of settings. Because I say, like, the topic today are general principles of round building, and I suppose whatever my experience, most of my experience is in, let's say, fairly traditional bars. I make drinks that would have been recognisable sort of back in sort of pre-prohibition days. And so what can I, without going to your venues, how can I tell you what is going to work in your environment? I mean, you know when someone comes into a new job and they were pretty good at their old job and they come in and they just throw their weight around and they just think that they're right, they're not very popular. I mean, you don't like that guy. Maybe some of you have worked with someone like that. So I'm trying not to do that. But even though bars are very different, I think that there is actually a lot that is general. And so that's what I'm going to try and talk about today. So, in terms of the problem that we're faced with is that temperature is key to the enjoyment of a cocktail. Now, I want a cold drink, like ice cold martini, ice cold daiquiri, cold beer, but I want to drink it in a nice temperate environment. Like, I don't want to drink cold cocktails outside in the middle of winter. But what this means is that as soon as we serve a cold drink, we've kind of got this tug of war between the drink, which is cold, and the room, which is warm, and the room is very big, the drink is very small, so there's only one winner here. So as soon as we serve a cold drink, it's going to start warming up, or it's going to start changing, and that change usually isn't for the better. So I suppose, as a general idea, whatever drinks you're serving, when you finish it, give it to someone, that drink is as you want it to be. I mean, let's say that drink is perfect at that moment. And I mean, that's like, you might like a martini, you might like a pina colada. I'm not talking about the sort of relative merits of drinks, but at that moment, that drink is as good as it's ever going to be. So in an ideal world, I would serve every drink that I make straight away. But because I've only got two hands, I've got lots of things in my hands, sometimes that simply isn't possible. So the kind of first general principle that I'm going to talk about is, if you can't finish everything together, is there a way to finish things in a particular order that is going to help mitigate the harm of things changing? So our first general principle of round building is that if you can't do everything at once, the order in which to complete drinks is determined by their perishability. So as I say, perishability means cold drink, warm room. And now, I haven't seen your menus. Some of the drinks I'm going to mention here are very traditional, but what I want you to do, I mean, throughout the session, we're going to be using our imagination, because I'm talking about drinks, I can't make drinks. But try and think how the items on your menu might split down into these three broad categories. And our first category are actually fairly bartender friendly. So here I'm talking about drinks that are served above 0 degrees and without ice. So easiest things, glass of red wine, like neat spirit. I could put that up on the pass. That's going to be fine probably for quite a while. Bottle of beer from the fridge, white wine, fizzy wine. That is going to start to change immediately. But I still reckon that any of those drinks in the first category, I think, can probably stand for 5 minutes, and if I get them to you in that time, they're still going to be decent. So I'm going to set myself a target for these kind of first category drinks, that I want them to be with the guest within 5 minutes of me completing the drink. Now, our second broad category of drinks is basically everything served on ice. And I'm not too worried about particular ice types, be it cubed, crushed, block ice, even kind of frozen drinks. I think we can group all of these together and kind of finish them as you wish in that. But the main thing is, when we serve drinks on ice, the ice is going to keep the drink cold for the time it takes to drink it. So I mean, here we've got 0 minutes and for 30 minutes. And I was just serving some -5-degree cocktail and on different kind of ice types and just seeing what happened to temperature over the next half hour. And we can see that both cubed and crushed ice will keep a drink below 0 for half an hour. Should have been drunk in that time, hopefully. Otherwise, what can you do? And if I were to be serving that on craft ice, block ice, again, you'll see ice comes out of the freezer. That actually knocks off quite a bit to start with. A little bit less effective at chilling in the end, but they're still going to hold the drinks at 0 degrees for half an hour. Dilution's going to be a lot more divergent. You're going to get a lot less water added here than you would with crushed. But the main thing is that these drinks are still going to be, I reckon, in the short term, they're going to be staying cold because you've got ice there. But actually, rather than in terms of flavour, I think in the short term, a lot of the time the change has got more to do with appearances. There you've got a whiskey sour and a gin and tonic, which I've made fresh. Same drinks 2 minutes later. So the whiskey sour is separated. That's fine, I don't mind that. The ice has sat down a little bit in the gin and tonic. That's fine, not floating. I'm still happy to serve that, but it has changed. But that means that I'm going to set myself a target that for all of my ice drinks, I want to make sure that when I put that up on the pass, I want that to get to you in time to taste it. I don't know if any of you have had much to do with drinks photography, but the professionals, not me, they have things like fake ice cubes, kind of spraying on droplets to make things look cold. Because if you actually make things look cold and try and take photographs, it doesn't last very long. But we live in a time where you serve a drink, someone's as likely to take a picture of it on their phone and put it on social media as they are to taste it. So appearances definitely count. But these drinks, perishable, but I'm going to give myself 2 minutes. My third category of drinks are below 0 and without ice. So basically, I'm talking about straight up cocktails. Think daiquiri, think martini. Now, going back to that, in the absence of ice, these drinks, as soon as you serve them, nothing to stop them warming up. Conversely, I think that temperature is probably most critical to the enjoyment of a martini or a daiquiri, because I want all of my drinks to be cold, but these ones, it really, really counts. And different drinks have different expectations. If I serve you a beer from my fridge, that's at 4 degrees, I'm like, that's a cold beer. You're pretty happy with that. If I serve you a martini at 4 degrees, you're like, why do you hate me? What did you do? I mean, that's just not good enough. What this means, though, since I'm not going to serve my straight-up drinks on ice, if I've only got one freezer on my bar, the glass I'm going to keep in it is my cocktail glass, my coupette, whatever I choose to use, because that is going to help keep the drink cold. What I have here are some more -5-degree cocktail strained into coupette glasses. One was from my freezer at -20. This one was hand-chilled, so with ice and water, and that was a room temperature glass. And we can see in the first 30 seconds, my frozen glass drink has actually gotten a bit colder. Hand-chilled, not bad. Room temperature has already jumped substantially, and over the next 5 minutes, they all warm up by about 3 degrees more. But after 5 minutes, my martini in a frozen glass is still well under, and my martini in a room temperature glass, not great in 5 minutes. But frozen glassware, brilliant for keeping your martini cold in the short term, but it's one of the most fleeting phenomenon is the frosting on glassware. This is where I really don't have enough hands. I was not anticipating the microphone and the clicker. But so now, in the space of 1 minute, here, everything gorgeous frosting. Just in the space of 60 seconds, the drinks are still fine, but this is sweating down from the top, and I don't know, some of the first impression is starting to go there. So I'm going to set myself a target that for any of my straight up cocktails, I want those to be getting to the guest within 60 seconds, which isn't a vast amount of time. So essentially, I want to make sure that all of my first category drinks and my second category drinks are up on the tray ready to go before I go to finish off my third category drinks. And just... Oh. All the way up. Just to recap, first category drinks, bartender friendly, served above 0, beer, wine, spirits, shots, etc. Category 2, everything on ice. Category 3, straight up cocktails. And I think when you're thinking about how this applies to your menu, I guess the overall point is just think what is vital to the appeal of a particular drink, think how quickly it might lose it, and the faster it's going to lose that critical thing, the more priority in the order it gets. So, it doesn't really matter what order. Doesn't really matter what order you finish your drinks in if there's too long a wait between them. I did a couple of sessions earlier this year where I was talking about round building actually on a bar, and just making a simple round of a gin and tonic, Tommy's Margarita, so on the rocks, and a Manhattan. Now, working sequentially, if I made the gin and tonic first, that took me about 35 seconds. Then I made the Tommy's Margarita, that was finished after about 2 minutes. And then I made the Manhattan, that was finished at 3 minutes. So I've already missed my target of 2 minutes for the gin and tonic because it stood there for 2.5 minutes. Making those drinks again, but working on them all at the same time, the gin and tonic and the Tommy's were actually finished at about 2 minutes 15, so it took me much longer to complete the first drink. But then the Manhattan is just about ready to go. I was actually a little bit quicker overall as well, but it meant that the time interval between finishing the Manhattan and finishing the gin and tonic was 30 seconds. Makes no difference to the Manhattan, but the gin and tonic is better, and because we're thinking of the round as a whole, the round is better. Now, when working on more than one thing at the same time, it's helpful to break down the making of drinks into a series of steps. Now, some drinks might have a lot of steps, complicated, some drinks much simpler. But I reckon because we're going to be trying to work on drinks in intervals, because I can't give one drink my undivided attention, I reckon there are going to be some steps that aren't urgent, some steps semi-urgent, some steps that are urgent. And by thinking about that, that's going to help us to sort of complete the task at hand. So, move some of my props for now. With whatever drinks we're making, there are probably going to be some steps that we can do before we add ice. So let's say, if we imagine that I was making a daiquiri and a martini, I might well pour the ingredients for the daiquiri in my tin, ingredients for the martini in my mixing glass. I can cut my twist for the martini. Then I've got my next steps. So our second area, actually I think I've got a slide for this. Prep is our sort of first thing. So basically anything that we can do before ice touches things. When we come to process, it's worth thinking about how methods sort of differ. When I'm talking process, I'm thinking we're now going to add ice and make it interact with liquid. Because actually what we're doing with ice when we're mixing drinks is a little bit different to when we're serving them. When I serve a drink on ice, it's because I want it to stay the same. I want to stop change happening. I want it to keep cold, which is why kind of big blocks of ice are good, because less surface area, they melt slower, so they keep things the same. When I'm mixing a drink, I actually need liquid and ice to interact faster than they would of their own accord. If I just leave a glass of gin and vermouth and ice on the side, it doesn't turn into a martini. So I need to stir that to encourage those and mix them around. But when we've got methods like stirring or churning a drink, say swizzling a like mojito, these drinks they're going to chill our drink, they're going to dilute our drink, but they're not adding a textural element. Whereas when we shake a drink, we're actually going to beat aeration into it, which means we can incorporate ingredients like egg white, which we couldn't do otherwise. But generally speaking, we can say shaking introduces texture. However, if we don't then strain our drink quickly and get it out, then we can lose the benefit of that. If I make a whiskey sour, shake it well, but then leave it standing not quick enough, I'm going to lose quite a bit of that texture there. So whereas stirring is like semi-urgent, what I mean by that is that if I start stirring my martini, I can stir that, I can taste it, it's about ready to go. If I were to leave that for 10 minutes, it's going to be bad, but if I leave it for 30 seconds, I can now shake my daiquiri, I can get my glasses out of the freezer, and I can finish those two drinks, get them out together. So where we've got steps that I've described as semi-urgent, this is going to give us a break point. And break points are good because we need to work on things on intervals. And then, obviously, when I say finishing drinks, final garnish, presentational touches, ready to go. Oh yeah, and those are the two general principles of round building. It's like I've got through that in reasonable time. So second general principle, whenever a drink is completed, the next one should only be one step behind. So yeah, here is the idea that what I don't want to do is, I've just shaken my daiquiri and strained it, but I realise that I haven't started stirring my martini yet. Because now I'm stirring this, stirring is slower than shaking, it's not getting there, and my daiquiri is just melting away while I finish my martini. So we want everything to move forward and try and cross the finish line as close as possible. So just to recap, these are my two general principles. And this is why I think whatever drinks I was serving, I could be making coffee. I'd still be thinking about some of these same ideas. There, it's different, the drinks are warmer than the room, but whenever you're serving drinks that are out of kind of whack with the environment, they're going to change and it's not going to be for the better. So I'm going to be thinking, what's going to change faster? And I'm going to be thinking, how can I work on these things together? So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to try and demonstrate this. And of course, the challenge to like making drinks without a bar, and that is why we have round building blocks. So to recap, green block is going to represent a sort of a not urgent step here. My yellow blocks are my sort of semi-urgent steps, which is usually going to mean stirring, churning. And then red is going to be, this is urgent. If I start doing this, then I want those drinks to be going out, because as we saw, 1 minute is not a very long time. I'm now going to reorganize my table. If you just talk among yourselves for a second. I just need more hands. I mean, this is the same challenge as bartending, really. You just don't have enough hands. And so, I am going to make for you guys, a glass of champagne. So one of my bartender-friendly first category drinks. I'm going to make you a whiskey sour and a mojito. I'm going to make you a daiquiri, and I'm going to make you a martini. Now, I'm going to work on this together. So these three, I'm going to pour my ingredients for whiskey sour, mojito, daiquiri. I've got various shared ingredients there in citrus, sugar syrup. No need to pick up a bottle twice. Prepare my garnish for a whiskey sour. I can dry shake this at this stage because, again, no ice, so you can regard that as prep. Can build my martini in the glass there, cut my twist. So at this point, if let's say a guest comes in, I need to greet them or I need to take a payment, something distracts me, I can walk away from the round for a couple of minutes. It's not going to have any ill effect on the end product. At this stage, now that I've done all of the prep I can on my cocktails, this would be the time where I pour my glass of champagne. Indeed, if they were like some beers to get out of the fridge, anything like that, perfectly reasonable to do this first. This might take a minute or two, so don't pour the wine early. But at this point, before I add ice here, I'm going to finish that off. Say 3 blocks of finished drink. That's not too urgent. I'm going to give it like a sort of a semi-urgent. But now I am up against the clock. Now I want to get on with this because eventually that glass of champagne is not going to be as good as it was. Now, in terms of the order that I want to finish these drinks, daiquiri and martini, I want those to be done last because if I can get those to your lips in under 60 seconds, I think that is going to have an appreciable benefit to your enjoyment of the drinks. But that doesn't actually mean that I'm going to start working on them in that order necessarily. Stirring a drink is relatively slow compared to shaking one. Shake for like 10 or 15 seconds, you're done there. Stirring a drink down is likely to take a little bit longer. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to ice up the martini first. I'm going to stir that a little bit. Now what I'm aiming to do here is not go quite as far as I want to serve it, but because I'm not beating texture into it, I'm going to stir it a little bit, taste it. I know where I'm at on that. And now this is going to give me a break point. And at this point, I'm going to ice up my mojito. I'm going to churn that, straw in, taste it. Now that's basically good to go now, but whenever you're making a crushed ice drink, you have to add ice in 2 goes because you've got to crown it, you've got to make it look nice. If I were to leave the mojito for 10 minutes, it won't be any good anymore, but again, I've now got time to, that just needs finishing. I'm going to shake my whiskey sour, I'm going to strain that, and then I'm going to apply my final presentational touches to both of those drinks together, so grouping my sort of iced second category drinks together. Now, not very much left to do here. Maybe have a final taste of that. Does it need a bit more stirring? Let's say it does. I'm going to ice up my daiquiri. I mean, I just can't mime stirring and shaking and use the microphone simultaneously. But you kind of like... get those glasses out of the freezer as late as I can, strain them off, garnish that, everything goes out, and even if that's going to the table in the corner of the room, I'm now hoping that these drinks can get to their guests within the time frame that I've kind of set myself as a target. And I guess that is the kind of like, one thing actually is worth noting, that having a variety of different methods and serves is helpful. A lot of the time, life is hardest if you have to do lots of the same thing at once, because we've got 2 hands. If you want to work efficiently, you want to be using both your hands, but you also want to be breaking the tasks down into manageable chunks. So if you actually, let's say you've got like 4 different shaken drinks on the rocks at once, this starts to be harder because I have to shake 2, shake the next, maybe these ones are waiting. So this is worth thinking about when you design your menu. Have some different serves, because chances are it will actually make your life easier when you're making drinks. I'm going to do a few more little examples with the building blocks, because I mean I carried them here. I think let's just introduce an element of jeopardy to the presentation. So let's say I was making simple round, 2 people, just a whiskey sour and a French 75. Now this is a case where no reason not to, I can build both my ingredients, dry shake that, make my garnish. I like to pour fizzy wine into a flute before I shake the drink, saves me doing it later, so I'm going to actually half fill my glass with champagne in my prep. And then I can shake both of those drinks together, finish both of those drinks together, easy peasy. Making 2 drinks at the same time, it's just, it is the dream. But what happens if I start adding some more drinks to this round? Okay, so now I'm going to add a Mai Tai. Now, at this point, I've kind of got like a question as to the order that I might choose to do this, because French 75, although it's a shaken cocktail, I'm not freezing my champagne flute, and the textural dimension to the drink has got more to do with the fizzy, well, it's basically about the fizzy wine rather than me shaking aeration into it. So at this point, actually, I reckon, prepare all of my drinks, obviously. The question here for me, actually, I think is like, if I've got my rocks glasses in a freezer, I'd probably be inclined to shake and finish my French 75, and then do my whiskey sour and my Mai Tai next, just because I think that actually, particularly the visual appeal of that is going to be more stable than these ones in rocks glasses. On the other hand, if my rocks glasses are like on the back bar, then finishing these 2 drinks is definitely going to be fiddlier than finishing just this 1 drink. So I've got 2 hands there, so I might well finish the 2 drinks on the rocks, and then it's going to take me no time at all to finish the French 75, so it's going to be less of an interval. So again, like the way my bar sets up, the principles are the same, but what I might choose to do is going to depend on what I have in my environment. If I were to add a margarita now to my round, I was expecting a bigger table. Margarita there. So at this point, given that I've got 4 drinks to make, building blocks again. Now, I'm definitely going to finish the margarita last. That's certainly the most sensitive as far as I'm concerned. But so it makes sense. I've got 2 hands, shake and finish Mai Tai and whiskey sour, and then I can shake and finish these guys together. On the other hand, if I were to hadn't anticipated moving building blocks with one hand being as slow as it is, I thank you for your patience. So let's take out the whiskey sour. And now if I put in a clover club, so in this case, I want to finish the clover club and the margarita last up. So in this instance, I'm going to group the French 75 with the Mai Tai and finish both of those together, which then just means that I've got the final touches to do on those. Everything goes out together. So again, the way my bar sets up, the way each ticket sets up, these are things that I can play around with. I mean, honestly, that's part of the fun of mixing drinks for me. Is like each ticket is like it's kind of like a little puzzle, and I really enjoy that aspect of it. But yeah, I suppose just to say, in conclusion, hopefully you can see this. Like, it's not. I honestly don't believe that this is about having rules that you must follow, because I think that rules can be very restrictive. Rules that work in one place might not work in another place, and better. On the other hand, I think that understanding your methods and just try stuff. A lot of the time, if there's a question of like what's going to work better, just make 2 drinks and see. There was a guy in Satan's Whiskers last night asking why I don't reverse dry shake things. I was like, well, it makes a lot of foam. I happen to be making a pisco sour at the second, so I just built it, like, make one. So I think that this is nice foam. I can't get as much, but I'm getting nice foam. I can do my sort of cool Angostura bitter garnish, send that out, and then just make another one and reverse dry shake it. And you just get like a cloud of froth. If you want to achieve that with a drink, and it might be that for something that works well, but the main thing is, if there's a question, try it. Don't take things for granted, and understanding what you're hoping to achieve, setting yourself targets in that, and thinking how you can go about achieving those targets, I guess, is the kind of like the mindset that I think can help us all to just keep getting better. Anyway. I think that is most of the content I have there. Thank you for inviting me, Monica. Cheers.
Thank you so much. I think that was very useful for many of us. But I'm very curious to know, in your research, was there a myth or something that we all are taught as bartenders that you kind of crushed and realized was wrong?
I don't. I mean, any of you who have had a look through the book, I mean, one thing. I mean, again, think about the annoying member of staff who starts in your bar and thinks that they know everything and thinks that their way's better. Like, you're not going to get on well with that person, and there are definitely some. I mean, it's pretty clear what, if anyone wanted to know what do I think about bar method, it's easy to find it now, but I don't expect everyone to agree with me on a bunch of points. I mean, if there's one takeaway from that, I mean, we didn't talk about things like pour testing and tasting of drinks here today. It's not really the time for it. I definitely think bartenders should taste their drinks. Indeed, actually, if you just want to ignore everything I've said up to this point and take away that one thing, if you are making drinks from scratch, you do need to taste them. Once you start pour testing, you realise that you're not 100% accurate. And so if I make 10 daiquiris in a row, I'm probably going to correct 1 or 2 of them for sweet and sour. And yeah, so unless you're pre-mixing everything, taste your drinks. I don't know. I mean, I think I have tried to be, whatever I think, I've tried to explain why I think it, and it definitely has all come about from testing. Many drinks thrown in the sink, many long arguments with other bartenders, and usually though, the best thing to do is just to go and try something. But yeah, I'm all like super up for discussing any of the stuff, because really that is how we move things forward. I mean, we've been like doing a bit of stuff with the Schofield brothers up at their bars, and those guys, they like cobbler shakers and they like hard shaking things, and that's pushed me. I've always been dismissive of cobbler shakers. I still don't particularly want to use them, but from talking to Joe and Dan, I have now got my very expensive Birdie cobbler shakers, and I have had a play with them, and I have learned something from doing that. So the main thing is, I think that discussion, yeah, like, I don't know, just like if someone's doing something that you think's weird, ask them. The only answer that annoys me, if I see something, I'm a bit like, why are you doing that? If someone gives me like a reason, I might think that reason is flawed, but at least then we can test it, we can try it. What annoys me is when someone says, "Oh, well, someone told me that was the way." Actually, there was a guy who came to Satan's. He'd contacted Kayla, and he wanted to come and do the pour test. I was just like, "That's really cool that you want to do that." So yeah, he came in. We did this during service, and the way he was holding a bottle, he's basically doing it like that. And I mean, this, as you can probably see from my expression, is really uncomfortable. And he just did it, and it's just like, and he was very slow and not brilliantly accurate. And I sort of said to him afterwards, like, I'm out of interest. Why do you hold a bottle like that? I was just like, oh, well, it's how I was taught. I was like, but isn't that like really uncomfortable? He's like, yeah, kind of, but yeah, you can put your thumb there. I'm just like, whoever has taught you has done you a disservice, but you also haven't helped yourself by not questioning it. If we question what we're doing, we might find a better way of doing it. If we don't question what we're doing, we'll never improve. So yeah, I suppose if I have trampled on any toes, then my intentions were good. Oh, sorry.
And you briefly mentioned the pour testing as well, and that's also an element of the book.
Yes. I do care deep. Well, I think it may not be the most glamorous action, but probably the most repetitive, like the action that we perform the most on a bar is just pouring liquids from one thing to the next. And if you want to make drinks consistently, pouring consistently is important. I mean, there's only so much point in learning the specs if you can't actually pour liquids accurately. If you've worked in a free pour bar, then everyone does pour testing regularly because everyone knows that free pouring is a liability if you don't pour test. What I would suggest to you is that jiggering without pour testing can also be quite a liability in its own right. And well, I mean, I first started doing this when I was working at Milk and Honey, and at that point, I had a jigger for everything. I had 5, 10, 15 spoons. I had a 20-40 measure. I had a 15-30. I had a bunch, like half of my bar top was covered in jiggers. And I was just interested. I was kind of like, how accurate am I with this? So I made up a pour test, did it myself, and didn't score very well. I scored like barely 90%. I was like, that's a pass on a free pour test. And so I did it again a bit slower. And yeah, I think this is a great thing for all bartenders to do, because you will do it and you will not score 100%. I think if you are proficient, then you can score 95 consistently. On a good go, you might score 98, but you'll never score 100. I think this is a really, really helpful realization, because It shows that you have to taste your drinks because you're not 100% accurate, and B, it means that, I don't know, it's just practicing these things helps. Yeah.
I agree completely. I'm going to open up for questions from the floor. If anyone has any questions, if of course. If not, I have many.
My number one question is also an opportunity to give you a plug. But can you sign my book? Anyone else
yes,
in the room?
Thank you. Should I
And have you had that before? Are you starting to get a lot of people coming in talking about the book in the bar?
Yeah, I can't spell for shit.
I followed up with, do you get that question a lot in the bar? Do you get people coming in and chatting about the book on service?
I do get a little bit of it in the bar, and it's always embarrassing, and I'm not very good at kind of taking compliments about it. In answer to your question, am I selling it? I brought 4 copies with me. Who asked that? You're the second person to ask, so you have a copy of the book. I have no means of taking money, but you outstanding. Yeah, you showed. Is that a question or a request for one of the 2 remaining books? Yeah, I think they're around the back, but yeah, okay.
Any
what
questions?
What was I saying? Do I have further questions?
How many accreditation tests you do every week, every month, or?
There was that the pour test thing. Did you say? I work on it a lot when someone first starts. So let's say we hire a new member of staff. That's something that I will do with them straight away, just to see where they're at. It's a little bit unlike free pour testing. You do just need to do it like start of every shift, at least weekly. The most important lesson is doing it the first time and realizing that you suck, which is definitely what I did. But once you realize that, practice definitely improves things. The test is timed as well, and generally being able to just pour quickly and accurately, especially when you are very, very busy at work, practicing that helps a great deal. Kevin and I just do it for sport, because we're kind of geeks like that. So basically, any opportunity we'll do it. And yeah, I try and get our staff to do it sort of as often as I can. But the main thing is to get people first. But I think, again, topics that I think should be emphasised more when training people in the first place. A lot of the time, I think when you start working on a bar for the first time, someone just hands you a jigger and expects that you're going to use it. I think that is a reckless assumption. So yeah, it's a topic that I certainly would impress on people early. And again, sort of much like that, along with round building insofar as once you know how to make a gin and tonic and a daiquiri, think about how you'd go about it if you were going to make a gin and tonic and a daiquiri. Because again, that's what we do. Like, professional bartending isn't about making one drink. So I think that idea should be introduced at an early stage.
And I think also.
Pardon? My favourite pourer? Are they Robert Dias or the kind of like generic speed pourers? I don't have a particular brand that I love. I think that we order them from Ascot. They send us what they send. But yeah, in any case, they're kind of like the bog standard ones. I don't know their proper name. Spillstock. Okay, yeah, I don't know.
But also, do you always use pourers when you pour from a bottle, or do you sometimes just pour from the bottle?
If it's stuff from the back bar, then I'll pour without pourers. I don't envy people who work in bars where they do everything straight from the bottle. And although I think there's probably more of this in the United States than there is in the UK right now, and this idea that the bartender is just so good at what they're doing that they just pour it from the bottle and they know the level and it's perfect. I'm just going to say, I don't think these people are actually testing themselves, and I would be interested I think it would be interesting for them to see. But, I mean, again, to anyone, I think like it's not that my way is obviously better, but I would be interested to test things rather than just assume them. And I think that pourers make life a lot easier.
Yes. So if the pour is wrong, it's the pourer, not the pour top or the bottle, probably.
Oh, what was that, sorry?
I just said that if the pour in the end is wrong, it's probably the person, not the bottle, the liquid, or the pour top. It's the person pouring.
Yeah, it's definitely the person. I mean, I think that, whatever kit you choose to use, then I think practice and checking yourself is probably a good idea. But
all right, I think we had a question here.
Thank you very much. We're big fans of all the work at Sage and Whiskers and of your book. But this is kind of an old school thing. You make it very simple, but it is really difficult to consistently build your rounds properly, especially when you work with classic cocktails and they can ask you whatever they want, and they can ask you for a mojito any time of the year and you're ready to do it. It's very difficult. It seems that the bar world has reverse engineered that and find methods to go past it. So they're pre-batching. I've been in bars where bartenders do only part of the menu. Like, an order will come in and there's a bartender that just does a stir drinks and another one does a shaker drinks. They don't never mix. And it kind of works. Have you ever found methods that go round the round building?
I think that the general ideas probably apply throughout, but on the other hand, in different settings, pre-batching, very, very useful, particularly in higher volume settings. Also, you can incorporate ingredients, home-make ingredients you can't do otherwise. I think for particularly long drinks like carbonated highballs, I think you can do some really cool stuff batching it that you simply can't do making from scratch. But you're right, these are definitely somewhat sort of traditional ideas. And if I get a ticket for, let's say, God help me, there's a ticket of like 10 people. Occasionally it happens in Satan's, we put 2 tables together. If I get a ticket through for 10 drinks and there's 2 of us on, I'll definitely split that, because there's a definite limit to how much you can do at once before it's just impossible to get things out in the kind of times you want when you're trying to do too much. Making drinks in Satan's is fiddly. Everything is made from scratch, things change all the time. I wouldn't always set up a bar like that. Certainly at Street Feast, we were tending to do much smaller menus and we would utilise pre-mixing a lot more. So I think, a menu should fit its environment, because it's definitely it's a whole process. There's no point in writing a very fiddly component drinks list and then just failing to get it out to people because you've made your life too difficult. But I still think that as long as we're serving cold drinks in a warm room, and as long as we've only got 2 hands, there's still the ideas are still going to be relevant. But I would definitely employ them differently and tailor them to the environment, which is why I've trying to have as few rules as possible, and just some guiding ideas.
Thank you.
All right, Dean, you can finish with one question, but not asked to sign anything else, please. Then we'll let that.
This might sound ridiculous, but in the culinary world, you have a pass. So people put the dishes up, and there's a hot lamp. In my dream bar in my head, the dispense would have a freezer plate and be chilled. So when you're putting the drinks up, they would then stay in kind of situ. They'd stay cold. Has that ever been discussed or considered?
If there was some kind of like chill ray that you could just shoot at things, that would be. If you can invent it, then I'd be interested to try it.
The question was more, have you ever considered that? Has that been debated? Changing the environment to make the drinks last that little bit longer?
It is not something that I personally have ever considered. On the other hand, I suppose keeping... Actually, like a funny one, doing event work, this is a bit of a tangent, but doing events at Street Feast where, let's say, you needed to serve 200 glasses of champagne as a welcome drink, it's a lot easier in winter than it is in summer, because if you set up trestle tables outdoors and you can pour 200 glasses of champagne, and it's colder outside than ideal service temperature, and it lasts forever. On the other hand, when you need to serve thousands of beers in the middle of summer and a truck's just turned up and deposited pallets of beers in the sun, and you're like, it's next to impossible. But yeah, I'm not sure. I think we just need to accept the nature of cocktails. They are fragile flowers, and I mean the Harry Craddock quote of like when best to drink a drink is when it's laughing at you. And I think the same thing is true now as it was 100 years ago. Cocktails should be drunk while they're laughing at you, and my job as a bartender is to make sure that I give you a chance to do that.
And with that, I think we say thank you so much to Daniel. It was amazing. And for everyone else, thank you so much for joining us, either in person or online. It's been a great few days before.